Hello YouTube and welcome to a new video. Alright, so you've understood how the pieces move and now you want to try to take it to the next level. You want to try to see if you can play some as well. So this is a normal setup as we went through previously. But I'm going to show you how to open up the game in many different ways, and after that I'm going to show you some nice checkmates for you to go through. So first off, when you open up a game, beginners tend to play something like A4 or H4, A5 or H5. I'm sorry about that. Beginning with a pawn move in the on one of the flanks. This is called the king side because the king is on this side of the board, and this is called the king side because the queen is on this square, right? So either opening up with a queen pawn or king pawn, but you shouldn't do that, and the reason for that is simply because this move, it doesn't do anything for your position. It might open up for your rook here, but that's pretty much it. Let's say black continues with A5, rook A3, rook A6. Now these rooks have a large scope. They can do a lot of damage, but as a matter of fact, in the opening of the game, you want to focus on these minor pieces right here. They are called minor pieces because they are worth 3 points, not 5 as the rooks, and not 9 as a queen, right? So opening up for the rook and bring a rook out might be a bad thing, especially since after you move A4, black can play E5. And if you now move your rook to A3, well, then this bishop will just chop it off. And the problem with that is his bishop is worth 3 points, right? And your rook is worth H5. And so in turn, you are having a bad position after this. Basically because you don't have enough firepower through the rest of the game to actually break through. But there are some exceptions, of course. Many people love to sacrifice their pieces, something that is worth less than what they really give. So if you play with like this, then be sure that you can actively bring these pieces out as well, as fast as possible, and to attack the enemy king. But the reason for me suggesting you playing either E4 or D4 in the beginning of the game is simply because it opens up for a bishop. So let's say these moves, and try to bring out your knights before the bishops. The reason for that is a knight, as I said in the previous video, first video on this series, is that they have a limited scope. The bishop can go all the way here, right? This knight does not go all the way here immediately. It has to, let's say this knight wants to go here. Then it needs to do 1, 2, 3 and 4 moves to get there. But by bringing in your knights first, you kind of get a better sense of the whole board, and your knight can attack more easily. But some might bring out their bishop here or even here. This is called the Spanish opening, and black has a couple of different choices. He can place his knight out, play A6, but we're not going to go through typical openings. We're just going to go through opening things to know about the openings in general, principles that you should think about. So opening up with these moves opens up for your bishop, and it takes control of the center squares. These are the central squares right here. And you can argue that these also are somewhat central squares, because they are all a part of the centrum, right? And the reason for you wanting to have an advantage in the center is simply because that's where the action should take place. If you control the centrum, then you will definitely have more piece activity. If you get your bishop out here now, then surely you are having that for sure. But black might try to play c6, opting to play d5, and then you can play knight to c3. And now if black chooses to play d5, you can take, pawn takes back, and knight or bishop captures that pawn. And as you can see here, black hasn't developed any pieces whatsoever, and he might be in a bit of danger here, simply because these two pieces are developed and black doesn't have any pieces developed at this time. So that is what I want to show you. Fast development, trying to get your pieces out as quickly as possible. And also, let's say these moves right here. Just simply castling. Castling gets your king to safety. The safety is that these pawns really make a shield in front of your king, so that it's much harder for your opponent to actually get to the king if he tries to launch an attack. And if you watch me or some other YouTuber play, then you will definitely see us doing this castling move, simply because you get the king into safety, and also you might be ready to bring the rook into the game as well. But the rook wants to stay on these positions right here. Like, you want rooks on open files because there they have more range. So let's continue this game now. Let's just try to play this a bit strangely, but we'll see. So after castling here, then rook to e1. So white is intending to play e5 and opening up for this rook. This rook, if it gets into an open file, it has so much potential. And if you, in the end game, get a rook, let's say onto e4, then it has all of this scope, right? All of that. Even though a bishop is going as can reach to the same amount of squares, almost, it still hasn't the potential of the rook, because a lone bishop cannot really checkmate your opponent's king, but a rook, it can. But okay, so let's say black plays here, you take, black takes back. Now this diagonal right here is a bit weakened because the bishops are gone. So here you might want to try something like this, even though bringing out the bishop is better. Rapid development, always think rapid development in the beginning of the game. But here, if queen c4, and let's say black does a weird looking move, such like this, trying to want to play this move, c5, but it doesn't want to do it right away, then you can take the pawn with check, and the king moves. And here you can see my queen is deep inside of my opponent's territory. But what you don't want to do is try to aim for a quick mate like this. Even though it is really fun when your opponent goes for that. Queen here, you intend to take here, which is a mate. And if, let's say, black plays knight to f6, then queen captures f7 is checkmate. The king can't take the queen because it is guarded by the bishop on c4. But there's a problem with this. if black chooses to play g6 here instead, white has to move this queen a second time. So let's say the queen goes to f3, then black could play queen to f6. And now if white chooses to take on f6, then black is up in development. He has 2 pieces out and white only has 1. And since white started the game, that's pretty bad. So my suggestion for you guys is not to bring your queen out too early, simply because the queen can be chased away pretty fast. And if, let's say, after this move we go here, we're not threatening to take, because if we take there, then the queen can capture, then the queen on b3 would capture, but then the king will capture back, and we just lose a piece for a pawn. That's not good. And let's say knight here, then we have an even bigger problem. Where do we put our queen? The queen is chased away even more. And if we are stupid and play something like queen to e3 now, then black actually has knight captures c2 check, forking not only the rook and the king, but also the queen. So after the check, we have to move the king, and then the knight can pick up the queen. And that is really bad. And the fork, by the way, is a tactical motive that utilizes a double attack. So this is a fork, and it's actually a royal fork, because it checks the white king and attacks the white queen at the same time. And there's nothing you can do about it. Let's say we go here, knight captures, pawn captures. And it is pretty hopeless to play on from this point. If you're down a queen, it's really hard to win the game. But there are exceptions, of course. And as I mentioned, tactics are really fun to join into. Like, tactics can just be a mate, but it can also be sacrificing your queen to get a winning position, or just simply winning by force with a checkmate to follow. So opening with e4, as I suggested, is a better try than a4, a5, simply because it opens up for the bishop. And d4, the same idea, d4, d5, bringing out the bishop, maybe even something like this, bringing out your knights, and let's leave it at that, because I really don't want to say that you should play this or that, because these are just principles. Get more space in the center of the board, and also try to get your pieces out as rapidly as possible. But if your opponent tries to attack you before you are ready, or before all your pieces are out, don't continue bringing out your pieces. Then you have to defend against that attack, right? But bringing out your queen, let's say here, is, as I said, premature, because it simply doesn't do anything. The queen doesn't have anything to do there. So let's say white just continues with queen over here. Now it even blocks in his own bishop, right? So bringing out the queen too early can not only make you move your queen multiple times, but also actually block your own pieces inside of the position. And as I said, I can't state this enough, you want your pieces out. These 4 pieces are the ones you want to focus on in the beginning of the game. As long as it is possible to play them out, do so. But again, these are just principles for you to really think about and to try to understand by playing. And after a while you might find it interesting to start studying some openings. And by studying openings, you actually learn some common moves. So let's say in this position we play e4, black plays c5, knight f3, d6, d4, pawn captures d4, knight captures d4, and knight to f6. This is called a Sicilian. This is just an open variation of the Sicilian game. And this is one of the openings that you will surely meet a lot, at least if you try to play for a bit longer than just one game and just being done with chess all over. But okay, so rapid development, control of the center, which are these squares primarily, and trying to get your pieces out. And yeah, in this opening actually, black doesn't open for his bishops, but by playing this move he tries to get control over the d4 square, because white wants to play d4 to open up for both of his bishops, right? But if d4 is played right now and c captures d4, queen captures d4, then knight to c6, and the queen is under attack from the knight. So then let's say the queen moves back, and then d6. Now black is again out with a piece and white is not. And since white starts the game again, black has the initiative. Black has more power in the middle of the board. Controlling the center, trying to get your pieces out as fast as possible, get your king to safety, either by castling or by bringing your king over, and then bring your rook out. Alright, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, you don't actually have to play e4 or d4 to get your bishops out and get pieces going. You can also play something like g3, bishop here, to excel this bishop into the middle of the board, and by doing so trying to get at those center pawns, center squares from a distance. And many people do this, and after, let's say here and here, by placing a bishop on the g2 and g7 squares in front of a king and having this pawn formation right here, actually is called a fianchetto. You're fianchettoing your bishop. So that's kind of fun to know, but you will learn all the terms there is to know in chess once you get started. It's so much to learn when you're starting out, and still, even the world champion says that he has so much to learn. Magnus Carlsen, the Norwegian world champion. They are playing again in November actually, and that's going to be fun. Caruana versus Carlsen, the two C's. But okay, let's go through some mating patterns. So, what should we do if a white king is here and a black king is here, and we have two rooks, like so? We are playing white, and black doesn't have a chance here. How do we play and win in two moves? Well, it's something called the stalemate. Look at this. It reminds you of a stair, right? It goes up, up, something like that. And by doing this move right here, rook to a2 check, you're forcing the king down the board. It can't go to the sides because the rook is attacking, and you can't go up to any of these squares because this rook is really just safeguarding all of the third rank. So the only move is king to d1, king e1, or king f1. And now rook b1, checkmate. That's kind of fun. And if the king was here, I'm about to sneeze, I'm so sorry. And you give this check, Then black plays king to c1. Now, you don't want to play rook to b1 check. Well, you can, but that's giving away the rook. So what you want to do is bring a rook either to b2, forcing the black king, because you can't say pass in check, right? In chess, not check. You can't say pass. You can't just stand and watch a move as you do in, for instance, Go, the game Go. So now black doesn't have the option of playing anywhere but here. And then you can mate him. And the same thing happens if you put a queen on the board. Let's say we have something like this. And now the queen goes to b4, check, king to e3, rook a3 check. And now the king can't go here, can't come any closer, but it has to go somewhere. King to e2, queen b2 check, king d1, and rook a1 checkmate. Again, this is checkmate because all of the squares around the black king is covered by these two pieces. And yet the king is also in check from the rook. And there's no pieces that can come to the rescue and defend against it. So let's go to another position and let's see if you can find a checkmate in one move. There are two different checkmates here. White to play and checkmate in one move. Pause the video if you want to and try to find the best two ways to win right away. Okay, so you can go here, but that doesn't do anything other than simply stopping the black king from going up the board. But that makes no sense because our king stops him anyways. So there are two checkmates here. The first one is queen to e7, which is checkmate because our queen is guarded by our king, and then two kings can't go close to each other, and this queen is safeguarded by our king anyways. And this square is under attack by the queen, this square is under attack, this square is not available, and this square is not available. And the king is in check. Checkmate. Another mate, which is kind of a bit harder to find, is queen to c8, checkmate. And as I said, a king can't go near another king. So even if this queen was here, there's no option for him going up the board here. And you can't go off the board, right? You can't step further than these squares right here. You can't go beyond that. That's why this is checkmate. And that also goes for the rook. This is also a checkmate. So if you really want to look into this mating pattern of the rook and the king, I would recommend you doing so, because there are a lot of possibilities for the rook and king versus a king. Now let's continue with something else. Now we're going to try a little tactic which is really nice. Really nice. And this is called a smothered mate, really. And what you want is this position right here. That is a smothered mate because the king is blocked inside by his own pieces, right? His own pieces does the job for white. But in this case, white plays one move that will ensure and secure him the game. That is knight to c7 check. And of course black could take, but then white would play this check. And there's no other move than bring a rook over, defending, but queen captures c8 is checkmate. So black doesn't want that. Black instead tries to play his king to b8. But then white has a sneaky move. Knight to a6 check. That's not only a check from the knight, but also a discovery from the king, because the knight moved away. So this diagonal has opened up because this knight moved. So now there is no other choice than to move the king. The king has to move when there is a double check in the position. There's no going around that. If there is a double check, then you have to move your king. You can't place anything in between or something. But one of the pieces can be captured though. That has to be said. If the piece is close enough to the king, then you can definitely capture it. Now the king moves back to a8. And after queen to b8 check. It looks like you're just giving away your queen, right? But as a matter of fact, this king can't take the queen because it is guarded by the knight. So the only move to play is rook captures b8. And now, do you remember what I said about the smothered mate? Now you have this move. Knight to c7, checkmating black. That's kind of fun. So that is called a tactic. A sequence of moves that actually wins you the game, or at least gains something in the position. Another tactic would be something like a rook and a king in this position, and knight here check, forking the king and the rook. After the king moves, then we take the rook. Although in this position, even if white let's say white had a pawn on a2 as well. Black can simply play king to c6, and this knight is actually gone. There's nowhere to play that knight. This move is occupied by the king, right? So after king to c6, let's try to bring our king closer. Then king to b7. We can't move it anywhere without it getting taken, right? But we might as well try. If you let it stay here, then black will chop it off anyways, right? So king captures. The king moves over. King goes here, king here, king here, king here, king here, and king here. Now, we can't really do anything about having a draw. I'm sorry. The problem with this is that there's no way for us to actually get that pawn inside of the a8 square and actually getting a new queen. So let's say we black is a bit funny and plays something like that. Now there is no way for us to get that pawn up the board and to be promoted. We can try. King goes here. a6, king goes here, and now if we play a7, that's the reason why this is a draw. If we play a7, the king has no squares, because both of these are checks, or just simply illegal, and you can't capture the pawn either. So after that move, a6 to a7, the white king can step here, but the same thing happens. This and this and this are all guarded. So the black king doesn't have a move, but he's not in check. If there was a bishop here, then that would be checkmate, but there is not. So this is called a stalemate, and that's a draw. That is half a point to each of the players, pretty much. Another kind of fun draw is when there's only two kings left. Let's say we had a rook here and here, and now this is also just a draw, by the way, because even with the rooks on the board, it's really hard to get the other king to be mated. But let's say white here plays a rook to e3. And now rook to e6, guarding from the check on the king from the rook, right? But as a matter of fact, none of these rooks can actually move anywhere from this e-file, simply because they are pinned. And that is something else that you should know about. A pin is when you can't or don't want to move your piece away from the square because, well, in this case, you're getting inside of a check, so it's impossible. But let's say we have this move, this here, that is also called a pin, because that rook is pinned towards the king, but it can't really take our rook, because then black puts himself in a check. So that's really annoying. Another thing that is annoying is a skewer. And a skewer is something like this. If you have your bishop here, you can actually place it to h3. Let's say the king is here then, since this rook is actually attacking the king. You can place your bishop here to h3. And since this is check, the king has to move. And then you pick up the rook on c8. A skewer is pretty much the opposite of a pin. A pin, you don't want to move the piece, or can't move the piece, but with a skewer you kind of have to move it, because otherwise you would lose too much material or the game because you made an illegal move. If you're in check, as in this case, and you have a pawn and you're playing over the board, not online because that's not possible, but if you play with a friend and you play this move, that is illegal because the king is still in check. You can't be in check, but did you know that actually capturing the king is also illegal? That is pretty weird, right? So if you're playing in a tournament and someone plays this move, don't take the queen. Don't take the king. Take their queen, of course, but not the king. By taking here now, you would actually make an illegal move yourself, and thus you might lose the game. That's pretty insane, but those are the rules. So both of you made an illegal move in that case, and if the pawn captures the bishop, then this would look pretty silly, right? Because white can't really checkmate black, and if black, let's say black plays here to g3, then white plays here, rook to g3, then some children that I've taught chess to actually thought that this position was drawn because the pawn can't move and black doesn't have any other moves. So that's pretty funny. But the problem is the king is not on the board anymore. There is no king here. So if you see this happening in any one of your friends' games or something like that, be nice and tell them that you can't really capture a king in a chess game. But okay, so let's try to find another checkmate for white. In this case, there are two bishops here, and black has his king on b8. There's a checkmate in two moves in this position, but how do you do it? So the black king is on a black dark square, right? So you can't check him with this bishop, so it has to be this one. So let's say we go here, check, and this bishop occupies this square, and the king kind of occupies every other square. The bishop too covers the c7 square, of course. So the king would have to move into the corner. And then, since it is on a light square, now we play bishop to d5, checkmate. So the king can't really go anywhere from this point, and it is checkmate. Let's see that with a knight instead. So let's say we have this position. Let me see. Yeah, this position right here. White to mate in one move. So we can consider playing our knight here to d7 check, but that will actually let black escape with king to c7. There has to be something else. Now, it is a bit difficult to find, but notice that the black king is on a dark square, and the bishop goes only on dark squares. So bishop to d6 actually is a checkmate. These squares are covered by the knight, and this square is covered by the king, and this square is covered by our bishop. And the king is of course in check. It's checkmate. Really fun. So now that you know about some of the basic checkmates, now I want you to really think about what happens in this position. Can black draw the game? No, he can't. The reason for that is the king can't come to the other side and actually pick up this pawn, because this pawn has 1, 2, 3 squares, and the king has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 moves to get to the corner. It's impossible for black to do anything. But let's say white plays here and king goes here. White plays here, king goes here. And now white plays a8. But he is a bit ruthless. He thinks that he can win with this. But he can't. This is actually a draw. And if it promotes to a knight also, that is to a draw. A knight or a bishop cannot mate by themselves. But a knight and bishop, of course, could mate, but it's pretty hard to do so. That is something you should really look into, but no different mating patterns before you go through this one, I have to say. So the easiest is to promote that pawn that was on a7 just to a queen. Just get a queen. It's simple. But notice that if, let's say, the position is like this, and black has his king here, and white has 2 pawns, and now black plays, white plays pawn here, king here, pawn here, king here, and you get a new queen. Right, and that is with a check, so that would be fair enough. Then you are probably winning because it is with a check. But what if the pawn was actually here and black stood on d8 and black played king to d7? Now what would you promote to if you were white? Would you promote to a queen, a rook, or would you probably prefer a knight or a bishop? And why would you prefer a lesser valued piece in that case, if you choose to do that? The reason for it is simply because if you promote to a queen, then there is no check. The king is not in check. The queen doesn't check like that. And you are covering all of these squares, but also all of these squares. That means that black is in fact again in stalemate. And a rook again would do the same thing. A rook 2 would not do you any good because it is just the same. Right? So probably a knight or even a bishop would do the job here. But it's pretty hard to see that sometimes, right? So now I'm going to give you a really hard tactic. Really hard tactic. I have to think for myself here, actually. How to put it up. There we go. I think, yes. Okay, we'll let it do this way then. Or even here. No, what am I doing? Okay. This way. I think, yeah. What? Again, what am I doing? Ah, there we are. Yeah. So white wants to win the game. And white can do that, but it's not simple. How can white actually win the game by force? This is a really hard tactic, by the way. So don't be discouraged if you don't find the move. I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds, and if you would like to, you can pause the video to find it before I show it to you. Okay. So the move here is actually queen captures e5. It looks like you're just giving away a queen, right? What is this? So the queen would have to recapture. If the king moves, then we just take the queen. So that's not possible. So black takes the white queen and says, ha ha ha, I got the queen. But as a matter of fact, he did not. Because now you have knight to g6 check, forking the king and the queen. And in this case, black would have to react by moving his king, since there are no pieces to really guard that square and take the knight. So right now, white is winning. All hope is lost for black at this point. He might as well just resign the game. Let us do one more of these tactics. And let's try to do this here. White to move is like this, sorry. No, it's like this. Is it? I'm not sure anymore. Yes, like this. White to move and win the game. You have 5 seconds. White to move. Pause the video if you want to. Okay. So the correct move here is queen captures d7. This rook can't really do much. It can go anywhere. Here, 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 or here. But it doesn't matter. But if the rook chooses to take the queen, then rook to b8 check. And as a matter of fact, this pawn is guarded by our bishop. That means that the king doesn't have any safe squares because our pawn is guarding this square as well. So the only move is rook back to d8, and then rook captures d8 is checkmate. And in this position, if black chooses not to take the queen, then white is just winning anyways, because these pawns are easily picked up, and the black king is really having a hard time getting his king out because of this bishop guarding that pawn. So that was the final puzzle. And if you go to chess.com or any other web page that has chess related material on them, you will find that there are many tactics to solve, and I'm definitely encouraging you to do that. Chess.com or Lichess are both excellent sites for tactical solving. Chess Tempo is another one. Yeah, choose the one site that you like the best. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Rapid development is essential. Getting your pieces out is really crucial in the game. So these games, the games that I'm playing right now, is simply really easy game to watch. This is a pin, by the way. This knight is pinned by our bishop. If it moves, then we take the bishop. And the same thing happens to us. Bishop to g4. If we move this knight, then bishop captures the queen. So this is somehow rapid development for both players. Although this position is very symmetrical, and in most games you wouldn't see this symmetrical structure. But once one side tries to attack, let's say h3 here, then black has no other option than to take, go back here, or retreat somewhere along this diagonal. So if it takes, then immediately we have another position. It's not mirrored anymore. And in this position you don't want to actually take with your pawn, because that is called a doubled pawn, and that might be terrible for your king's safety, just because you open up in front of the king, right? All of these squares are then available, and this pawn gets really weak, and this pawn gets really weak. But most importantly, your king is not safe anymore. So it might be very dangerous for white. Although some players tend to play something like, let's say black just plays some random move. Here. Now black has to be a bit careful as well, because this rook is actually attacking the cover in front of black's king. White's rook here is really aiming for that king as well. So opening up in front of that king can also be helpful. And let's say the queen moves here. Let's say rook here, and then queen moves to e1. What do you play as black? Let me switch sides here. What do you play as black in this position? 5 seconds. Exactly. You're playing knight captures f3, giving a check and picking up that queen. So after the king moves, then you take the queen. And you're a queen up. So even if white takes the knight back, you have a very good chance of winning the game. So don't try to be funny and give yourself a bad structure like taking back with your pawn. If you have the chance of taking with the queen, then do so. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to talk about some tactics and strategy and some other mates, and also we're going to go through some positions that may arise or may not arise, but They are taken from real games, and we will see how some players utilize both tactical and strategical thinking in their games. But now you know at least how to open the game, and as far as I'm concerned, you should know how to mate, or know what a checkmate is, and have a pretty good understanding of what a tactic is as well. Alright, I think that's it. Have a good one. See you in the next video. Bye.